On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
This week's episode, the entire episode, is a musical tribute to Ray Reardon.
I'm very interested to find out that orang pendeks are snooker loopy. Well done to everyone involved.
I really like the old credits.
So what do we have in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis and Archie, first of all, we go to either Warwickshire or Worcestershire, I can't remember which one it is, but you'll find out soon enough, to visit a place called Rouslench Court, where legendary big cat researcher, the late Quentin Rose, who I met once and was a jolly nice guy, and deserves to have been taken far more seriously than he is, where Quentin Rose had a big cat sighting of his own. Then we go to, well, the corner of this room, in fact, where we meet for the last time the away team who are off in Sumatra and will be back about a week after you see this, looking for the orang pendek, and they're talking again about what they hope to achieve in their expedition. And then we go to Kent, where we visit my old friend Neil Nixon, with whom I talk about the interesting use of social science in discovering the truth behind Fortean phenomena. And that, believe it or not, is far more interesting than it sounds. Hello ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of On the Track. My name's John Downs, I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and every Saturday afternoon for about half an hour and every Wednesday evening for about half that, I bring you a mélange, if you like, because I've got tired of saying a potpourri, a mélange of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality, you might ask? Well, check this out.
I'm not surreal. I'm a well-behaved young chicken who lives in a little 2 up, 2 down behind the compost heap.
But before we start the show, first of all, I want to apologise for the fact that I sound like a manatee with consumption. I've had a horrible cold and I'm croaking like all sorts of croaky things at the moment. And I do apologise, and I do hope that I'm not completely inaudible as a result of this. And I also want to answer a question that's been sent me by 3 or 4 of you who will remember that some weeks ago I played a few of my old songs on the show, more for fun than for anything else. But it was prompted by the fact that I had an email from a guy called Michael, who used to be in my band, John Downs and the Amphibians from Outer Space, many years ago. They're talking about the early 1990s here. And he asked whether any of the old songs that we used to do before I made the 1995 album, The Case, were actually available. And the answer was no. But I had so much fun recording 2 or 3 of the old songs for the show, I've actually recorded a whole album's worth. It's called Out of My Head, because it comes out of my head, not because of any other sinister reason that you nasty people with nasty minds might have thought of. And it will be out very, very soon. Here's the cover, and I hope that you will all enjoy it when it finally comes out. Regular viewers will remember that a few months ago Carl and Georgie went to Inkbarrow churchyard in Worcestershire, which had been the site of a notorious big cat incident. I think we should probably sprinkle the words alleged somewhere in this sentence. An alleged big cat incident back in the early 1990s when a couple, Nick and Sally Dyke, claimed to have had a particularly eventful encounter with a big cat which left Sally Dyke with big scratches on her tummy, which could of course have been caused by somebody with a 9-inch nail and a piece of plywood, or it could have been caused by the claws of a big cat. I leave it to you to look it all up and decide which of those scenarios you believe is the truth. But whilst they were there, they also visited a local stately home, or minor stately home, which was also the site of an interesting bit of British big cat history, featuring a guy called Quentin Rose, who's now sadly long dead. I only met the guy once. I did a TV show with him in Wales, and we spent a happy evening together in the pub, and he was a jolly, jolly nice chap, and I thought the world of him, and I was very sad when he died before I could get to know him better. But this story is all about Quentin Rose and a place called Rouslench, according to Carl. And you can see Carl's over there in the corner. Wave to the boys and girls, Carl. And Rouslench Court in also Worcestershire, I think.
Worcestershire,
yeah. So, over to you, Carl. So, Carl, what's the story of Rouslench Court?
Rouslench Court is where Quentin Rose was staying when he was investigating big cats in Warwickshire.
And did you see one there?
Yes, apparently he's got quite a lot of data, but I heard that it's when he died, it was donated to Rick Minter, I think.
That's a pity, because I would like to have read that. I like Quentin, he was a nice guy.
Apparently he had real clear video.
What, from Rouslench Court?
Rouslench Court. Yeah.
Do you know the story at all?
Quentin was investigating big cat reports all around the area to do with Ragley Hall, and he was friends with the gamekeeper Anthony Quiney, who was friends with my father. That's how we found out about all this. He was invited to stay at Rouslench Court because it was one of the main sighting spots, and they waited out every morning, and apparently he was there. Quentin Rose was there for about 2-3 weeks, and he did see the animal. There is some sort of evidence, but as far as I'm aware, it's never been released.
One of the reasons that they went to Worcestershire that morning was not just because they were looking for big cats, but because they were testing out the new drone that they've got ready for the expedition to Sumatra, which at the time we're recording this is leaving in just over a week. So, Geordie, how was it piloting the drone for the first time?
Well, this is the first time I actually took it out. I had a couple of test runs in the garden, just up and down a little bit about the area. But this is this time I took it up above, quite a few 100 feet above the church, and quite far out and coming back. So I was testing all the different movements I could make with it, and different speeds as well. You can have 3 speeds. Cinema mode, which is slow and steady, especially good if it's windy. and then there's the P mode, the normal mode, and the sport mode is up to 15 kilometers an hour. Not the fastest, but still quite agile, and the angles were getting quite well for it. I did quite some good manoeuvres and stuff like that. But obviously, I need to practice more and more. And I've been out since then. I've been out about 10 times now, so it's looking good.
How far up can it get?
You can unlimit it. It normally goes up to about 500 feet, but you can unlimit it to go up to 1,650 feet and up to 3 kilometers away from your GPS signal.
That's unbelievable.
But
isn't
it does have a GPS, so if you do lose the signal and you've got no data, it's got inbuilt into the controller, so it will return to home in this particular model.
What are you hoping to achieve with the drone in Sumatra?
Well, I'm hoping to get some fantastic night shots, morning shots, and quite a few lakes along the lakes, and to see if there's all the wildlife in the treetops of the jungle. And you never know, might see something more unusual.
Brilliant. I've always said that if cryptozoology is ever going to succeed in the aims and objectives which we have set ourselves, that we need to grasp the new technology. And it's amazing to see how far drone technology has gone just in a few years. It was well under 10 years ago that my mate Martin Eve and his girlfriend Marianne Holland came to live in the village, and Martin had a very early drone, and it was very primitive in what it could do, but even that I was quite impressed by. But the footage which Georgie has managed to take using this drone is absolutely fantastic, and I'm incredibly impressed by the quality of it. And I cannot tell you all how much I'm looking forward to seeing the footage that he, Carl and Richard will be taking in Sumatra. It is an absolutely fantastic opportunity, and I think that if we grasp this new technology, we may well get results that otherwise we would never have managed to achieve. When the boys come back from Sumatra later in the autumn, I have got an experiment that I want to try out with Georgie and the drone. There is a field belonging to a neighbourhood farmer who is an old school friend of mine, where there are always a small herd of roe deer, and occasionally you get the odd stag of the local red deer herd there as well. One of the things I want to try and do is see how it affects the deer to have a drone flying over the field at a reasonably high altitude and filming them, because I think that although at the moment we're mostly just using the drone for filming landscape, to use it for proper wildlife photography has got to be the next stage in our experimentation. And the only other thing I want to do is to get some little stickers printed with the CFZ logo on them, so we can put them on the drone and make them into the CFZ Air Force.
Chocks away, chaps!
Tell me about the history of the Orin Pendek. How did it first become known in the West?
The earliest writings about it are from the 18th century, from people in the East India Company, Dutch and English, who heard about this hairy wild tribe, the Orang Pendek.
And what was the reaction when the stories of these things came back to Europe?
Well, at the time, this was before the gorilla was discovered, so they knew about the orangutan and they knew about the chimpanzee. So it was thought that there would be other creatures like this. So it didn't cause that much of a stir, really.
I suppose that there were, in the 18th and 19th centuries, there were a lot of travellers' tales about wild men across the world.
Yeah, all over the place.
I remember, Carl, you were talking at one point about how the accounts of the footprints of the Orang Pendek had changed size
and shape completely. Yeah, a lot of the original tracks that were found that were attributed to the Orang Pendek were basically just little human feet, and we now know that they are very likely something completely different, which we were talking about earlier, called the Orang Kardil. So the Orang Kardil and the Orang Pendek have sort of become amalgamated at some point, and it's confused matters, shall we say.
So you think that there are at least two different unknown species, one of which may be human?
The evidence does point that way.
The genus Homo, anyway, not Homo sapien.
No, but the genus Homo.
But all the tracks I've seen are the typical Orang Pendek tracks with the 4 toes at the front, the offset big toe, and the quite broad heel for weight bearing.
Which does go very nicely along with your theory that it is an upright walking orangutan.
Mm-hmm.
Speciation only ever happens because of a biological imperative. So why, when there are 3 species of orangutan who are broadly arboreal, why would one break off to become, and how would one break off to become a biped?
Debbie Martyr thought that it was something to do with the Great Lake Toba eruption of about 75,000 years ago that would have stripped most of the island of its trees, forcing them to walk on the ground. But in that case, it would have forced the other orangutans to walk on the ground as well. So that doesn't really work. Nobody really knows why, but it has been noted by orangutan researchers that also when they're up in the branches and they're balancing, they'll stand erect a lot and in the branches balancing to reach things. And there's a theory that bipedalism originally began in the rainforest, not on the plains of East Africa, and that by the time our hominin ancestors, the Australopithecines, by the time they came out of the rainforest, they were already erect because they'd been walking around erect in trees.
I would hazard a guess too that it may have something to do with the tiger. It might seem like they couldn't have evolved in an island with tigers, but perhaps they did. Maybe a higher intelligence is the answer.
Well, the other thing is that Australopithecines, they were living mainly on the floor in the plains of East Africa, and they had crocodiles, pythons, leopards, lions, cape hunting dogs, giant baboons, martial eagles, all sorts of stuff having a go at them. They were bipedal, and maybe standing erect gives you a better view out in the open. Anyway, that wouldn't work in the jungle.
Well, this has been the last of the little pieces which you're recording for on the track before you go. By the time everybody watches this, it'll only be just under a week before you come back again. So in this totally plays havoc with people's ideas of time and tenses and everything, that we're talking about something where talking here something which won't be seen until your expedition's nearly over. But I am sure that I speak for everybody who is watching this show that we all wish you the best of luck and Godspeed, and all of us are looking forward very much for you to come back and tell us all about your adventures. Aren't we, Computer Boy?
Don't call me Computer Boy!
Now, the thing that I've always been interested in what you've been saying is the way that you use social science to explain and to investigate the things that interest you, which on the whole aren't cryptozoology. There are other aspects of Forteana, particularly UFOs. But I think that some of the things that you've said about UFOs are quite easy parallels with some of the stuff that we're doing in cryptozoology, and I thought it would be interesting to discuss that.
Yeah, so the social science thing, without going into all the details, my educational background is in that area, and when I've studied things educationally speaking, if it hasn't been a social science qualification, it's been based on social science. So the first master's degree I got was in education, for example, which is where I was then working, so it was useful from a career point of view. But even that included, like, research into education that used social science. So I would say that because I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, and my working life has taken me into educational areas where social science or media literacy and things like that were what I was teaching and what I was working on. The two subjects have existed in my working life in a way that means they keep colliding on that particular front, that you can't look at some ufology without seeing the kind of social science patterns. And a lot of us that were on the fringes of ufology for years had a feeling about this, but there wasn't much printed material about it. I mean, in recent years, as academic publishing's got cheaper, and more people have come into the academic field who have an interest in the paranormal, there is an absolute outbreak of this stuff now. So, there are books like Paranormal America, or the work of people like Susan Lepselter that look into belief systems among people who are, advocates of UFOs and aliens, and just what's driving it. And I mean, from my point of view, then I've been going to conferences, like you say, for decades, and I'd go along to things like the Unconventions when you and I were talking at them years ago, and it gradually became obvious to me that whilst it's all paranormal, i.e., it's more than the normal, and people are fascinated by the mysteries, there's, in a lot of cases, you can see that there's a separation. The things that run along the cryptid line tend to still be driven by science, and provably by science. So I was at the Seriously Strange weekend a few weeks ago, the ASAP conference in Bath, and I thought Richard Freeman's presentation, well, from my point of view, it was one of the absolute highlights. And effectively, he's just up there for 30 minutes, and he's giving us a blow-by-blow scientific breakdown on the 4 most likely cryptids to exist. So that he's effectively saying that, scientifically speaking, there's good circumstantial evidence for thylacines to exist. And I can't help but think, when I'm at conferences like that when you put that up against the ghost hunters, who seem to be celebrating the fact that they all have a good time going off to somewhere, but the provable scientific existence of the ghosts is still elusive. Or if we've got proven scientific stuff, it's like the work that Vic Tandy left us before he died, where he came up with the theory that in certain circumstances, things that we would experience as ghosts would actually physically exist. And ufology is the same. So, I mean, after a lifetime of being fascinated by this, I'm very much now of the opinion that a lot of the things that most amazed me when I was younger are a combination of either people desperate to believe so that the stuff that they see, the circumstantial triggers that they see, promote a very complicated belief system that you cannot easily stand up scientifically. There are the UFO cases I continue to love are the really surreal ones, because I've just, in the nature of having researched it for years, having done live talks on it, just people knowing that I was fascinated with it. So if somebody has a weird experience, their mate says, "Oh, well, I know this guy who's apparently is an expert on it. He's written a bit about it. Why don't you go and talk to him?" So whether you want it or not, these things find you. These cases find you. And a lot of the cases that have found me, and a lot of the stories that I've heard over the years, don't fit an easy scientific model, but they are surreal, and they fit a psychological model much more easily. But probably it's something that in a lot of cases is, a hypnagogic experience, like you're in bed and the alien finds you, but the moment when you're asleep or awake is very difficult to separate out, and you have a very real experience. So I love those cases. I mean, I love them, because they're fascinating and easy to remember, because they're all very individual, unique and surreal. And, I'm still driven, like most people in this business, I'm still driven by the notion that there are things to find out. I value the fact that this is, Peter Laws put it at the Seriously Strange conference, it's a place where, in inverted commas, grassroots can still make a difference. So clearly that's a motivator, that you can get out there and find things, and they're interesting. And then somewhere in the middle of that, I still believe that there may well be hard scientific evidence for something that didn't originate on this planet. And again, that's a motivator. I mean, my best take on that, although when I go on UFO podcasts, I get abused for saying this. More on being one of the more polite things I was called recently. But I still think, like the WOW signal, for example, it defies all explanation, and at which point all bets are off. I mean, you're familiar with that, John, yeah?
Mm.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the handful of your viewers that aren't, you can easily Google it. It's a strange radio signal, lasted just over 40 seconds, was picked up on the 15th of August 1977, and the best scientific minds in the world applying themselves to understanding it cannot agree on what it was. It may have been some phenomenally unlikely combination of earthbound circumstances where we picked up one of our own signals, or it might have been some random thing from outer space. And coincidentally, it came to us the day before Elvis died, so it might have been the Space Brothers calling him home. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, that's the explanation that I like most.
Yeah. Until anything else comes along, I'll go with that. That Elvis was one of them. Yeah.
And that, because otherwise we'll be seriously overrunning, is that for this episode. But we'll be back with Neil and his fascinating discussion in the next episode in a week's time. But now...
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another episode. Before we go, I want to say a big thank you to my producer Louis, and to Graham, who, as well as being my carer, is the Deputy Director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and to our new housekeeper, Miss Judy, who is an absolute star and is beginning to make this place nice for the first time in quite a long time. And I want to say thank you very much to my guests this time, who were Carl Marshall, Richard Freeman, Georgie Jackson and Neil Nixon. We'll be back with Neil Nixon next Saturday, And there'll be something exciting happening on Wednesday, but what is it? I don't know. I have no memory of it. In fact, I don't even know if I've recorded it yet. So, goodbye to everybody. I'm going to bed because my cold is making me feel horrible. And I will see you on Wednesday. And if you're there on Saturday, I'll be seeing you.